Good morning, LinkedIn. My name is Joel Bennett, and I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Practical Leadership, an opportunity for you to learn more about how to be an effective leader and build leadership habits into your daily work. If you are tuning in live, welcome, or watching the recording, please say hello in the comments and tell us where you're joining in from. It's great to see regular attenders, and we do have a fair amount of groupies from week to week, but we always love to see new folks as well. So if this is your first time, let us know in the chat, and so we can welcome you formally. If you joined us for our last session with Nordon Tokos on battling the fear of change, one of the things we asked you to do is to lean into change over the next week and focus on how you can do that. So we'd love to hear what you did or what you leaned into this week that maybe was outside your comfort zone. Just encourage you to be brave there and share. During these sessions, if you have not been a part of this before, we tackle real life leadership challenges and issues and encourage you to apply what you're learning in your daily work and just provide you actionable steps to do that so that you can kind of weave that into your own leadership practices and the team culture you're creating. So I've asked leadership experts from around the world to join me to kind of provide their own perspectives and experiences. And today I'm excited to be joined by Alyssa Burkus from Shift Wisdom, and who I consider to be the queen of the written word. Over the last 6 years, Alyssa has been an invaluable resource for me in my own communication. And so excited to have you here. Thanks for joining me, Alyssa.
Thanks, Joel. Great to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So today our topic will focus in on really two things that I think are a necessity in every workplace. One is change, and this was a topic we started with last week. The other being communication. And so specifically, Alyssa and I are going to just explore the topic of how writing can actually help us as a leader in leading change with our teams or our organizations. And I'm excited to get Alyssa's thoughts on this. But before we get started, as usual, I'm going to encourage you to be an active participant in the comments. Please share your own perspectives, your own experiences, any questions that you've got along the way. We definitely want this to be something that you not only take value out of, but can see and create some context for in your own teams. So before we get started, I want to see who has wandered in so far. And it looks like we've got Angelique from Louisiana. I think, Angelique, this might be your first session. If it is, welcome. Nordon, thanks for coming back. Mike Dykstra from Pella, just right down the road from me. And Seneca, great to see you in Indianola. I think you may have joined us last week as well. So great to have everybody here. Continue as you jump on to introduce yourself in the chat and tell us where you're from. But why don't we go ahead and get started? So Alyssa, as this whole concept of change comes up, and as I mentioned, I think change is one of the few constants in organizations and really in our lives. But I think it's also one of the biggest challenges that leaders deal with in leading their teams and doing that effectively. So with all that we've been through over the last number of years, it seems like in some ways we need new skills for leading that change. So is there something that you would recommend for leaders, whether experienced or new, things that you would suggest in doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. For no question, we're seeing differences in the workplace in terms of how people are looking at change. I think previously, and some people may still feel this way, that change was something you could treat as a project. You could plan for it. There would be a start, middle, and an end. We could say, great, this is done. And we move back to our regular or new mode, but that we could plan for it, have a limited window, and then be done with it for a period of time. And I think the change recently is that people are realizing we're in this mode of continuous change. Certainly, the pandemic knocked us sideways and showed us that we weren't planning strategically to consider something of that scale. But people are coming out of it and finding that things are different now. We're, as a society, we're tired and we've dealt with a lot, and change is becoming much more continuous, and things that people are feeling they need to deal with ongoing. So we may plan for something new to be introduced, but at the same time, there's other variables that are kind of coming into play. An example being, last fall in the media, we talked a lot about the sort of great resignation and the change in the workplace that was coming. And then it felt like overnight, all of a sudden, we were talking about mass layoffs in tech. And so the both and of something like that, we're just seeing things come up unexpectedly. And so that isn't to say, we have to sit back and just be, frustrated and overwhelmed and worried about it. It's that we need to be proactive in how we lead our teams in helping stay connected with them so that they know that you are, as a leader, the core source of information. They can rely on you to help guide them through, that you're staying connected with them and helping them navigate these things that are coming up for them. And I believe writing is one of those great ways to do that. It may, for some people, be an underutilized skill in their change toolkit. And so moving into adding written communication with your team can be a signal in and of itself that you are looking to lead them differently and be more connected to them week to week or day to day. And if writing has always been something that you're comfortable with, really continuing to integrate written word as a anchor to your team as they go through that change will help keep those ties within your team really well connected.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me is when we work with leaders in organizations, they'll often lament to me that their team members are not very good communicators.
Yep.
They'll even say, hey, when we're trying to hire people into the organization, we're finding people aren't very good at communicating. But actually, as we dig in, we realize that they're not great at communicating either, especially through writing. And one of the things that employee engagement surveys quite often come back with is, I'm not getting the communication from my leader that I need to do my job well, or to just even understand what's going on in the organization or where we're headed. So why do you think that so many leaders avoid writing?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? There's definitely a hang up there for some people that they feel, and they'll say to me, I'm not a good writer. And there's a couple things that come to mind. The first is, if we're not doing something, how can we imagine that we would be good at it, right? We need to be doing, working on it, practicing, and some of those skills will come. We don't just sit down at a blank canvas with a paintbrush for the first time and, paint like Picasso. It takes time and some skill building. It's also, I think, true that the way we were educated, for some of us, led us to believe there was only one good way to write, and that we needed to follow this very narrow model or definition. And so if we don't know what those things are anymore, are we not doing a good job? And the reality is that writing, like all forms of communication, continues to evolve, and there's different ways of communicating. Some people send their emails as if they're text messages, and that's okay. So I think it's understanding that there is no one way, and being more comfortable with stretching that a little bit. And then I hear a lot from people that things like, I don't know what to say, I don't have time, and when I write something, nobody reads it. And so worrying that it's really not worth their while, or maybe also that the flip side of that there's a real permanence to writing, right? It's, you could keep it forever. And does that create some nervousness for leaders? And so rather than digging into some of those challenges, we just avoid it altogether and set it aside and think, well, it's fine if once a month, I'll have a team meeting and talk about a couple of things. And the reality is, things are happening all the time that your team would benefit from hearing from you, much more frequently. So kind of stepping into those challenges, understanding what they are for you, and then starting to figure out where you can start to work on kind of moving through that.
Yeah, and I'll jump in on a thought there. I think for a lot of the leaders that I work with, entry-level folks, and I mentioned before, I work in industry, so a lot of factory leaders, construction leaders, folks that wouldn't typically think about writing as a big deal.
Yeah.
And I always have to remind them that if everything that they do is verbal, that writing is going to be a nice change of pace, right? And so
Absolutely.
even if that writing is on a whiteboard, a 4x6 whiteboard near their station, to be able to say, here's our focus for the week, or here's something to keep in mind, or great job on this, right?
Yeah.
When their teams see that, it catches attention. And
Absolutely.
so if I've never seen it before, wow, all of a sudden there's more there.
Yeah.
But to your
Print it,
point,
to your example, right? Print it and put it on the bulletin board in the lunchroom.
right?
We've done that a lot with change programs, right? Is figuring out where to change it up and still be able to use that skill. Yeah.
Yeah, the other piece I've seen, especially on construction work sites, is just like you mentioned, text messages, right? Being
Yeah.
able to text everybody at once and say, "Hey, looks like rain this afternoon, so here's what we're going to do differently,"
Hmm.
or we're gonna need a few guys to go over here to help with this project. It sounds
Yeah.
really silly, but I think to your point, we think of writing being this large. I'm going to write a blog post, or I'm going to write a book, or I've got to be super eloquent with what I'm going to write. And quite often it's just, no, it's another way of us getting the same message across that may actually be more effective for some people than something verbal, or even the difference for me, as you mentioned, of writing something up and giving it to people versus emailing it to people. Email is not always an effective communication method for everyone, because that actually means I have to open it.
Right.
And so thinking about the different ways that we can write and use that within our teams is huge.
Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
Probably the biggest question I would have for you in that is, when we talk about change specifically, right? And the difference between a change that we're expecting and maybe a change that we're not expecting,
Mm-hmm.
right? The difference between, hey, we've got this new product rollout or whatever else, and I need to get my team on board with that, versus, hey, we just found out that we're phasing out one of our operations on the other end of the continent. Talk to me about how leaders can use writing or should use writing to influence that change in their teams.
Yeah. I think there's being clear sometimes about those exact differences. Am I talking to my team about ongoing operational issues, or are there separate initiatives that I want to be communicating about, so that the team, as members, as they receive them, understand, is this something that I'm integrating into my work immediately or need to pay attention to right away, or is this part of an ongoing piece that I need to process and park and keep in mind? So finding ways to signal to them, is this a part of my regular communication to you, or is this part of an initiative or project? Helping them see that difference. Figuring out how to get in a regular rhythm or cadence with your team ongoing, so that they also know to expect information from you in a certain format, in a certain frequency, or on a schedule, right? That every Friday I'm going to get an update, short or long, from my leader about a couple of consistent things. Maybe it's wins from the week. It could also be your observations as a leader. Maybe you've been in some meetings and you're bringing information to them that they know they can expect to see that. Maybe it's misses, right? Things that have gone a little bit sideways, and your observations about what worked well, or further changes that are needed as part of recovery from that situation. Also really important that they know you are connected to what's happening and can be that voice for them. There's research around trust and leadership that says employees trust their direct supervisor more than any other message within the organization. And so, they'll see you that way and want to know that you can be that messenger for them in the rooms that they aren't in, and can help bring that information to them. So if there's a regular schedule or structure to what you're doing, and getting in the habit of that. It's interesting that writing itself has benefits to the leader in terms of thinking more clearly, helping you process situations that you've been in, helping you really think about what were my takeaways from that other meeting that I was in? How do I distill it down into the most important elements for my team? We sometimes forget that step, or the meeting happened a month ago. My team meeting isn't until the last week of the month. If I'm regularly staying connected with my team and giving them updates, I don't have to remember, at the last minute as I'm going into that team meeting, what are all the things I should be telling them this month? I've already connected them in the moment, and I've processed that for myself. So it's a both and in terms of benefits, certainly to your team, but also not forgetting that there's benefits to you as a leader as well. So I think that regular rhythm or routine initially will take more time than you expect, right? Or that more time than maybe you would like, right? That email on a Friday, the first time you do it, you're figuring out what are your headers, or am I going to do it in bullet points, the structure of it. But then it becomes much more easier the next time. You've already got a format and a regular structure. They will benefit from seeing the same format week to week, and they get right into going right to the pieces that they need as well. So don't be deterred if it takes you a little more time initially, because over time that process will get really smooth. And from the leaders that I've worked with who have been integrating this approach or writing in general with their team, they're amazed at how they start to look forward to having this additional channel to update their team that is more immediate, it's received differently, and they actually look forward to it. So it may not sound like something you would look forward to as I describe it, particularly if you're resistant to writing. But my experience has shown that you actually do get to that point. It becomes something that it just is naturally woven into your weekly routine, and you look forward to the process of all the things that come from creating it.
Very good. Yeah, one thing I'll mention, because this is a little tip that I give, especially leaders on the go, working leaders, meaning not that leaders don't work, but folks that are typically out amongst the people,
Yeah.
or on the move, not sitting at a desk, is the power of this right here as opposed
Yeah.
to is just at
Sure.
the beginning of the day, ask yourself the question, what does my team need to hear from me today?
I love
Sometimes it
that.
is like
Yeah.
hey, we've got this changing demand, customer demand, or hey, we're going to work overtime this weekend. Or it could just be, I need to be encouraging them. We've had a rough week, right? So they need to hear from me that I appreciate their work, that maybe there's even specific people on your team that need to hear something from you.
Yeah.
So, when people tell me I don't have time to write, I mean, if you've got time to pull out a Post-it note and jot down, 3 little bullets, now you at least have something you can carry around with you.
Yeah.
Make sure, hey, did I actually do this today?
Yeah.
We got a couple of questions. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I've seen people carry a little notebook, right? And have, so even if you aren't sending it as an email, you're capturing your thoughts in the moment. And then you have something to use to make sure that as you're going from team to team to check in, maybe that's your process is, walk the floor, talk to this shift, that shift, maybe at different times, is you've got your notes that you come back to that you've captured in real time, that makes sure you're also getting that message out consistently as well. So yeah, agree.
Yeah. Let's see what kind of comments and questions we have coming in. First off, David, Joe, thanks for being here. Great to see you guys again. Alyssa mentions, change is not a one-time project, and change waves keep coming, and that has really felt like the last few years for us. I think it's been true even prior, but it just feels like those waves are.
I was just going to say
faster and faster increments.
Yeah.
Mike Dykstra has a question. What suggestions do you have when communicating with a mixed group that communicates in the formal and the casual registry? So where there might be a mix of either a mixed group or maybe a mixed audience?
Yeah. I've had that a few times where you could do a couple bullet points at the top that just say, here's the highlights. And so for your casual people, that might be all they read. And then something that says, here's more detail about this, and then block it out for people who prefer a little more formal communication. I've seen it done the reverse way too, where there's a formal introduction, and then at the end, it's the highlights from above. And what your casual people will learn is they just skip to that. They'll scroll down and skip to that. So I think there's ways to be able to speak to both. I've seen people also try to do a bit of a blend, which becomes their style, which is, you are literally, if you are in a middle manager role, the blend between and I'm projecting, it's not necessarily true that it's more formal in the senior layers and more casual the frontline. Actually, sometimes it can be the reverse, but you are often that interpreter layer between different communication styles within an organization. And so sometimes a blended approach can be exactly what people need. So in those situations, I think a bit of experimenting to see what lands with people, maybe asking for feedback is, either in the message itself as you start to communicate in a new way for the first time. Not everybody will feel comfortable hitting return, particularly and sending you a message, but following up in person as you're walking around to say, hey, did you see, I'm starting to do that new thing. What'd you think? Was it helpful? You'll get some feedback as well, whether your style is landing.
Oh, great. Yeah, I agree, because I think that we may create something that works for us, but it may not work for everybody else. And so just asking the question, are you getting what you need? Is it clear enough? Sometimes also, is it timely enough? We may go on a schedule like once a week, and people are like, no, I'd like something a couple of times a week, because I want to know how we're doing or how we're progressing. So I do think getting that feedback's awesome.
What I was going to add also, we might tend to be more brief because we're hearing it all the time in the conversations that we're in. And so we're just sending quick bullet points that give updates on things. And we forget that we've got some new team members, or they're not in the same meetings we're in, and more is needed to really capture what people are needing to know. And so thinking about not just your own, what are you trying to get out, but what do people need? What is your audience familiar with, and how much more information do they need as part of your updates?
Yeah. Nurdan mentioned this thought process of the difference between, telling people and really engaging them and asking questions and having more discussions versus just kind of that one-way communication. And I heard from some of your earlier comments that, there should be some back and forth. Any other thoughts or tips for some of us that maybe fall into that kind of telling, preaching mode instead of the interaction?
Yeah, I've seen a few things. I've seen people ask for feedback, comments back. Tell me what you're doing to, integrate this into your work. And then actually following up in person, similar to my comment earlier, right? That not everybody's going to feel comfortable hitting reply and telling you. There are always people who will, no matter what, but not everybody will. And making sure that you're seeking out that feedback. Hey, don't know if you saw my email this week. I'm really looking to better understand this change in safety protocols. What difference are you making in your work in order to make sure that that's being addressed? And really listening for the answers can be a way to start to hear about that. I've also seen where the leader will say, in our team meeting this week, we're going to talk about these 3 questions. We're going to use the time in our meeting to really talk through. So please think about this and bring your answers. It's helpful too for the introverts in your team who love a bit of a heads up about what you're going to talk about. I'm one of those people. I never liked talking unexpectedly about certain things in a meeting. I liked a little time to percolate. And that can also be true if you're a leader of teams to say, in your broader message, your supervisor is going to be talking about these things in the meeting this week. And oh, by the way, giving your supervisors a heads up that you're going to be asking that and sharing that out is also important for staying connected with that layer too. But there's ways to integrate your message into other formats in that way too.
Good. So I'm looking at our time. We're on the kind of the wind down now, but
Yeah.
as we think about, you know, the whole point of these sessions being practical in the way that we
Yeah.
lead, and giving people just simple steps to kind of start moving in that direction. What's maybe we've talked a lot about different pieces today about how to communicate, where to communicate, when to communicate.
Yeah.
Um, what would you actually suggest as a simple step for somebody watching today to put into practice even yet this week? Something they could work on over the next
Yeah.
7 days to improve how they communicate through writing?
The writing approach or the framework from a writing for change perspective that I've used over and over and over again in multiple projects and jobs is, and it's collecting, what we spoke about earlier about starting to collect your notes through the week, little, small notes at the beginning or the end of or middle of your day. Um, Even setting timers to remind yourself to take 5 minutes to just make a note. Starting to collect those so that your Friday email is easier. I would really encourage you to find a way to connect with your team on a weekly basis, whether it's Friday or Tuesday, whatever day of the week is best is up to you. And then think about these 3 questions that people are really looking for clarity on. What's the key message from the week? Why does that matter to them? What's the so what for them? Why should they pay attention to this new piece of news that you have? And then action. What should they do about it? Or what can you suggest they do about it? This isn't, to Dan's comment earlier about always being telling. This isn't about you telling them necessarily what to do, although sometimes that's true, right? If it's safety, if it's really critical, if there's only one viable path, then it might be a telling message.
Right.
But often the action is, I need you to take 10 minutes this week and talk to a colleague about sharing back and forth what you're going to do differently, or how your work aligns to this new message or new priority that we're hearing from corporate, or wherever the part of the message is coming from, or what the so what connects their work to. But something that guides them around, this isn't just read it and forget about it. I need you to do something differently or take action on this, that they understand that that's part of the rhythm you want to get in with them. You're going to share a piece of information and really share the meaning for them. And then you want to hear back about action that they're taking towards it. Again, not in a telling necessarily overt way, but in a way that says, your job better than I possibly could. Even if I used to do your job, you are still in it day to day now. I want you to think about what this means for you and your work, and make those choices.
Yeah. I can't tell you how much I love that for a couple of reasons. One, it's a little bit of what we're doing here, right? So there's content, it's the what, there's the context, like what does this mean to me? And why is this important to me? And then the now what really is the action, right? So what am I going to do with this now? What am I personally going to commit to doing in that? So that's a great segue, truthfully, to what we are going to finish up with today, which is, many of you have invested the time here. You've got a chance to hear some great content. Many of you have also in the comments already been thinking about what could I do around this with my team, or what could this look like for me? And now I'm going to ask you kind of what's your now what? What are you going to commit to doing to use the time you've invested today to actually get a return on it? So, what could you commit to around this topic of writing and leading change to get that impact? And so that the time here you have that you've invested isn't wasted. So with that, I'd love for you to just jump into the comments, and you guys have been pretty good about this already, and just identify what's that one thing, maybe that one nugget that you heard about today. Maybe it's that chunking of the message. Maybe it's the Post-it note, whatever, right, that you can do to start improving your leadership and taking that to the next level this week. And once you've got it, just ask you to drop that in the comments so that when we get together for next week's session, hopefully you'll join us again and be able to share some of the success you've had already. So take a few seconds and do that now. And while you do that, I want to thank Alyssa for being here today. I love your passion for helping leaders in organizations communicate better. And I admire the fact that you still allow me to hold tightly to the Oxford comma. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Hopefully we can do this again sometime soon.
Yeah, sounds good.
If you want to get a hold of Alyssa and hear more about her work, I'd encourage you to reach out to her on LinkedIn and follow her posts. And for those of you that want assistance in improving your own writing, when you reach out to her, ask her about her upcoming writing intensives that start in May. So I'm happy to plug it that way. Alyssa's been a fantastic help to me over the years. So that brings us to next week. I'm excited to announce that Ruby Brown Herring will be joining me to explore the leader's role in team well-being. Keep your eyes out for that linked event posting. And if you want, you can drop a note in the comments and ask me to personally invite you. And I can do that via messaging here. And again, I just want to encourage you to take something you heard from today and put it into practice. I've had a few of you that have been here multiple times, and in some ways are getting to know other people virtually. I'm gonna put a little nudge out there. Maybe if there's somebody that you've seen in the comments or here on LinkedIn that's attended as well, shoot them a private message and tell them what you're going to work on, and try to partner on that together. Collaborate a little bit, hold each other accountable. If you found something here to be useful, I hope that you'll join us again next week. And if you're willing, invite a friend who you think might get value from it. And if you've stumbled upon this video and are watching the recording, but we're not connected on LinkedIn, or we've not had conversations in the past, send me a request and mention the show, and we'll remedy that. Always great to meet and interact with people out here. But regardless, I want to thank you again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Blessings.
Thanks.